Five Nights at Freddy's, Fazbear Frights, Book 8, Story 2, Sergio's Lucky Day. Sergio looked up from his drafting board and squinted in annoyance at the bright sunshine blasting through the wall-to-wall windows along the front of the office building. He shifted to avoid being blinded, and he rubbed at the afternoon kink in his neck. He checked the time on his new stainless steel aviator-style watch, 2:32 p.m. He peered at the subdials within the main dial of the watch. His watch had 3 subdials, and he had no use for any of them, but they looked impressive, and things that looked impressive made him feel impressive. Above all, that was what Sergio wanted to be, impressive. "I keep telling you, you have to be careful what you wish for, Serge." Sergio jerked toward the man who'd come up behind him, and he knocked over his coffee mug in the process. It went flying, but the man, Dale, Sergio's supervisor, caught it. Dale was a senior manager in the architectural firm, and a big guy, an ex-football player to boot. The mug looked puny in his massive hand. "Now you've gone and done it," Dale said, flicking a few drops of coffee from his wrist. Thankfully, there wasn't much left in the mug. The sun hit the top of Dale's shaved head, and it shined so bright it looked like a halo. "Sorry, Dale. Didn't mean to throw a mug at you." "What?" Dale looked down at the mug, then thrust it back at Sergio. "Forget the mug. You got it, Serge. You got the project manager job." Sergio stood, then grinned. "Really? I thought the decision wasn't going to be made until next week." "It got pushed up because Sanders is leaving sooner than we thought he was." Sergio slid his shiny black wingtips over the gray carpet in an abbreviated moonwalk, back toward the sunshine behind him. Then he twirled and did a fist pump. Dale chuckled. "Congratulations." He held out his hand. Sergio shook his hand, but then he frowned. "What did you mean by what you said?" "What did I say?" "Well, you said 2 things. Be careful what you wish for, and now you've gone and done it." "Well, you do realize how hard project managers work, right? Are you ready to start living at the office?" Sergio laughed. Dale didn't. Sergio sombered. "Are you serious?" Dale grinned and punched Sergio's arm. "Only a little. You'll probably only have to sleep here 3 or 4 nights a month." Sergio nodded, as if that was just fine, but it really wasn't. The truth was that when he applied for the project manager job, he hadn't really been thinking about what the job would be like. He applied because it was the next logical step from where he was. He was on a fast track to the top, and staying on that track meant applying for promotions, whether you wanted to do more work or not. At 27, he defied the laws of becoming an architect to get where he already was. He got through the college and post-grad work needed by the time he was 21. He was hired by the best architectural firm in town and had his license by the time he was 22. It only took him 3 years to get to senior architect, much to the annoyance of several older architects who got passed over. And now he was the firm's youngest ever project manager. Why was he able to do all of this? Well, 1, he was an architectural phenom. Ever since he was a kid, he had a head for numbers, an eye for spatial relationships. He knew how to mold physical reality into something eye-catching. And 2, he was determined. He was so determined to reach the top that he willed himself to work as hard as he had to. Nothing would stop him from getting what he wanted. But lately, he had begun to wonder whether what he wanted was really what he wanted. "Earth to Serge," Dale said. "Lost you there." Sergio shook his head. "Sorry." "Don't worry," Dale said. "We won't make you sleep here tonight." Dale let loose with one of his full laughs, which was just one step below a sonic boom. Sergio noticed that not a single head on the design floor lifted at the sound. Everyone was used to it. Dale tapped Sergio's drafting desk. "I'll let you get back to it, but after work, we should go out for dinner to celebrate your promotion. Say 7:30? Oh, and you'll need to pack up your stuff. I'll have janitorial bring you boxes. They'll be moving your things into your office tomorrow." Sergio smiled. That was another reason he applied for the project manager job. He was going to get his own office, an enclosed space. No more working out here in the open with the other junior and senior architects. Now that was impressive. Excuse me. As soon as Dale strode away, Sergio's closeted work buddy and closest work buddy, both in terms of desk location and time spent together, Clive, threw a wadded-up piece of paper at him. Congrats, you idiot. Sergio deflected the ball of paper and said, You're just jealous. Not even a little, idiot. Clive shook his round head, and his bushy brown hair flew into his eyes. For at least the thousandth time, Sergio marveled at how much his friend looked like Bubbles, the chocolate labradoodle Clive and his girlfriend Fiona, another architect of the firm, doted on. It wasn't just Clive's brown curly hair, it was his big brown eyes, the earthy tones he dressed in, and the fluid way he moved, always ready for some kind of fun. Once Sergio told Clive that he looked like Bubbles, and Clive responded with, Yeah, well, you look like Trotter. Sergio had to laugh at that. Trotter was Dale's dog, a spoiled miniature pinscher, and Sergio actually could see the resemblance. Like Trotter, he was small and compact and slender, and he had a somewhat pointed nose. Also like Trotter, though, he was muscular and sleek. He wore his black hair slicked back, and he always dressed in dark, fitted clothing. He knew he wasn't good looking, but he did his best to have his own impressive, of course, style, and his girlfriend, Violet, a junior architect at the firm, didn't even seem to mind how he looked. You realize I'm your boss now, Sergio reminded Clive. Clive snorted. Fine, Mr. Idiot. Sergio grinned, shook his head, and tried to concentrate on his work. Most of the department came to Sergio's promotion dinner, considering it was short notice for everyone. Sergio thought that was impressive. He hoped it was because he was well-liked, and not because they were sucking up. But he couldn't tell. He could never tell with people. He couldn't read people, and not even Violet, who he had been dating for almost a year. He was often unsure about what she was really thinking. Did she mean it and she said he was awesome, or was she dating him because he was moving up in the firm and she thought he'd take her with him? That was why he had to rely on hard work to get him the life he wanted. He was never going to schmooze his way to the top. He could no more schmooze than he could slam dunk a basketball. The dinner wasn't anything fancy. They all just traipsed across the street to the steakhouse that had been a fixture on the block well before the firm moved into their new office building the year before. But that was okay. The steakhouse had great food, and it had the kind of old-world atmosphere Sergio liked. Wood panel walls, leather chairs, dark-stained tables, plush gold carpeting, and ornate wall sconces. Dale had reserved the restaurant's meeting room, and now Sergio sat at a round table filled with his fellow architects. 12 of the 14 in his department were here. Everyone was having a great time, joking, laughing, flirting. Strike that. Everyone but Sergio was having a great time. Yes, he was throwing one-liners and laughing at the right times, but his heart wasn't in it. Ever since he had gotten the news of his promotion, he'd been battling a sudden onset of depression he couldn't explain. What was wrong with him? He had gotten good news, but it didn't feel good at all. So what's it like to be the new project manager? Violet asked as Sergio cut into his medium-rare ribeye. The grilled aroma of the beef on his plate combined with savory scents of butter and onions. His mouth watered as he watched pink juices run from the steak. He speared the bite he just cut apart. Sergio looked at his freckled brunette girlfriend. Short and pillowy, Violet was the picture of curvy femininity. To play up her soft features, Violet wore clothes with lots of trim and ruffles and color. Her wardrobe had sass, as she called it. She was always asking him if she looked sassy. He wasn't sure how sassy looked, so he always said, "You look sassy as heck, babe." Basically, he lied. Looking at Violet now, Sergio realized he often lied when it came to Violet. "Don't you just love romantic comedies?" Violet had asked just the other night as they headed to the theater for yet another romantic comedy movie. "Sure do, babe," Sergio said. He hated romantic comedies. Give him a good sci-fi or supernatural movie any day. Even horror was better than a romantic comedy. "I hate horror movies," Violet said on their second date. "Don't you?" "Absolutely," Sergio said. The same kind of thing happened with food. "Everyone seems to love Chinese food," Violet said on their third date. "But I don't get the appeal. It's either too bland or too spicy. What do you think?" "I totally agree," Sergio said. Chinese takeout was one of his favorite things. Violet chose how they spent their time, too. On their first date, Violet announced that she was a go-getter. She let Sergio know that quiet nights at home would be rare. "My mama always said, You stand still too long, V, and you'll sprout roots. You gotta keep rolling so you don't gather moss. So I like to keep moving, keep doing. When I'm not at work, I'm out having fun. Sergio had nodded, even though he was still untangling her mixed metaphors, and he really liked hanging out at home. Sure, he said. Life's too short to grow moss on your roots. Violet thought that was hilariously funny, which was nice because he liked it when people found his attempts at humor amusing. But it was equally not nice because Violet had a truly obnoxious laugh, a cross between a honk, a siren, and a snore. Violet's laugh attracted attention the way syrup attracted flies. She embarrassed Sergio on dozens of occasions. He actually started trying not to be amusing. It didn't work. Apparently, he was the master of inadvertently saying funny things, just just this evening after Dale told him about the promotion. Sergio went to Violet's drafting table and told her the good news. There'll be a dinner tonight. I assume you want to come. She laughed as if she just told the best joke ever. He found that baffling. Yes, Violet was smart, and yes, they had shared interests, and yes, she was pretty fun. But was it really so much to want a girlfriend who liked more of the things he liked? He wondered if they'd still be dating if he had told her the truth from the beginning. Would she even like him if she knew him? Really knew him? Heck, sometimes he wasn't sure if she liked the version of him that he was pretending to be. And sometimes he didn't like her much either. Violet was a flirt. Even though she was with Sergio, she liked to come on other men. And not just some men. All men. Married or unmarried. She didn't care. She just liked to flirt. Sergio had never liked the flirting, but lately it was really getting on his nerves. Sergio? Sergio blinked and looked at Violet. She was tugging on his sleeve. I asked you a question. I'm sorry. What did you ask? I asked how it feels to be the new project manager. Waiting until he'd put his first bite of steak in his mouth and chewed it, Sergio gave Violet what he hoped was a neutral look that didn't betray his annoyance at her. For once, he gave her an honest answer. Well, I'm not the project manager yet, am I? So I don't know. Violet let loose with her laugh. Sergio looked down and quickly took another bite of steak. The biggest issue in his relationship was that, well, Violet wasn't the girl he really wanted. But that girl was someone he hadn't seen in years. He wondered what she was doing now. Sophia Manchester started going to Sergio's high school during his junior year. He fell in love with her on the first day she came to class. Small and graceful like a ballerina, Sophia had dark looks he loved, and she had the face of an angel. She was also very smart, very nice, very funny, and unfortunately, very popular. Although she was also perfectly kind to him, and he noticed she seemed to like a lot of the same things he liked. They moved in entirely different circles. He didn't stand a chance, but he never forgot her. In the nearly 10 years since he had seen her, he had been trying to find a woman like her. Violet, sadly, wasn't that woman. Violet patted his leg, then turned away from him to flirt with Clive, even though only an airhead would flirt with Clive. Everyone knew Clive was obviously taken by outspoken, red-haired Fiona, who sat on his other side now, and Fiona was not a woman to be messed with. Case in point, when Violet leaned toward Clive to rub his chest against his arm, a spoonful of Fiona's mashed potatoes flew across the table and onto Violet's new blouse. "Oh, sorry," Violet purred in her smooth, confident voice. "I don't know how that got away from me." Violet sniffed loudly and extricated the potatoes from her blouse. She leaned away from Clive. Sergio suppressed a smile and concentrated on his steak. The steak was the best part of this evening, in celebration. He could have done without the forced camaraderie. Being friendly with other people was hard work, and he was tired tonight. He wanted to go home and stop trying for just a few hours, but he couldn't do that yet. He had to keep eating and bantering and pretending all was right in the world. After most of the plates on the table had been cleared away by the waiters, Dale stood and tapped his water glass. The ding-ding-ding brought up every head at the table. "So, Serge," Dale said, "we want a speech. You know we do." Everyone except Clive started chanting, "Speech! Speech! Speech!" Clive was mouthing "idiot" at Sergio. Sergio smiled and stood. "I'll make this short and sweet." Everyone cheered. Dale laughed. See, there's a reason this kid has advanced so quickly. Sergio grinned, as he knew he was supposed to. Well, here we go. Thank you, Dale. So, to you and the partners for the promotion. Dale inclined his head, smiling. You deserve it. Sergio smiled. And to the rest of you, he lowered his voice to a growl. You're mine now, maggots, and don't you forget that. He sat down. The table was silent for at least 3 seconds. Then Clive burst out laughing and started clapping. Violet joined in, and then everyone was laughing. Phew! For a second, Sergio thought he'd blown it. Of course, Violet wanted to go out dancing after the dinner, and she convinced Sergio to invite Clive and Fiona and a couple other architects. Even though Sergio enjoyed showing off his dance moves, they stayed up ridiculously late. Finally, Sergio took Violet home, then headed to his own apartment building a few blocks away, pulling his 2-year-old SUV into his assigned space in the garage under his apartment building. Sergio picked up his suit jacket from the leather passenger seat. He stepped out of the black vehicle, then closed and locked the doors. For a few seconds, he stood and stared at his SUV. He remembered how excited he was when he bought it. He had been wanting to trade in his old small pickup for a nice SUV for years. Once he'd done it, though, he realized he still didn't have the vehicle he truly desired. Why was it that whenever he climbed a little higher on the ladder, he felt like he had too many rungs to go before he reached the top? Sighing, Sergio left his SUV behind him and took the elevator to the 3rd floor. There, he strode to his apartment, hurrying quietly with his back to his neighbor's door. Mrs. Bailey was a busybody, and she liked to ambush him when he got home. Only once in a while did he manage to get past. Oh, it's just you, Sergio, Mrs. Bailey's scratchy voice said as Sergio put his keys in his lock. I thought I heard an intruder. You're quite late tonight. Hot date? Sergio took a deep breath, then turned. Hi, Mrs. Bailey. The petite, gray-haired lady beamed at him. In the daytime, she usually wore crisply ironed shirt dresses in pastel colors, but tonight she was sporting a frilly pink nightgown under a white quilled robe. How was work today? Fine. Sergio wasn't going to tell her about the promotion. Oh no, she would have insisted on inviting him in front of some kind of baked good, in spite of the time. He yawned. Not a fake yawn, just a well-timed one. I'm awfully tired, Mrs. Bailey. Please forgive me, but I need to get inside and go to bed. Of course you do, dear, Mrs. Bailey smiled at him. You go get your rest. Sergio thanked his lucky stars and slipped into his apartment before Mrs. Bailey could say anything else. He closed the door behind him and latched all 4 latches. He leaned back against his door and closed his eyes. Home at last. Sergio had a nice apartment, at least 1,200 square feet. It was far from tiny. The complex had been had been built only 2 years before. It spotted the most up-to-date appliances and modern features that his agricultural and architectural eye appreciated. A couple of friends from the firm had helped Sergio decorate his apartment, and it looked good. They had used neutral beiges and grays that felt both upscale and masculine, and most of the furnishings were expensive antiques. It was a decent place, but he resented that it was in a building that also housed the likes of Mrs. Bailey. He deserved peace, didn't he? He shouldn't have to put up with a nosy old lady who didn't have anything better to do than torment him. Sergio crossed the living room and went into his bedroom. Removing his wallet from his pocket, he placed it in the ceramic tray he used for his wallet and keys and whatever other detritus might come out of his pockets at the end of the day. He then undressed and carefully hung up his suit and put everything else in a laundry hamper. Tugging on gray sweats and a black t-shirt, he laid down on the bed and dropped immediately into sleep. The next morning, his alarm woke him at 6 a.m. Feeling groggy and foggy, he groaned and turned on the TV. Flipping through the channels, he thought about the long day he had ahead. He should get moving. He looked at the phone on his Queen Anne cherry nightstand. He checked his watch. It wasn't too early. He picked up the phone, leaning back on a pile of gray, white, and beige pillows. Sergio listened to the phone ring. It was picked up on the 3rd one. Hello? His mother's lightly accented voice said. Mama! Sorry, I did that as a joke. It's just Mama. Mama, Sergio said. Sergio, what a nice surprise! Something rustled against the phone, and her voice was muffled as she called, Tony, come here! It's Sergio on the phone! Her voice returned to full volume and beyond when she shouted into the phone, Sergio, you still here? I'm putting you on speaker. Your papa is doing his morning workout. Tony, come here! Come talk to Sergio on the speaker. Sergio shook his head. His mother sure did love her speakerphone. How's our Sergio? A deep voice boomed into the phone. Have you built any skyscrapers lately? The machine gun laugh that came after this ridiculous question was joined by his mother's wild giggling. Sergio shook his head again. You know I don't build skyscrapers, Papa. I'm in the residential renovation department of the firm. So renovate skyscraper apartment buildings. In a town where the tallest building is 10 stories high? You have to be a visionary, son. If you want it all, you can't reach the top without being able to see the top. You have to be bold and daring to stand out. Tony Altera knew all about being bold and daring and being on the top. The head of a massive transportation company, Sergio's dad was one impressive man. By the time Sergio was born, when Tony was 30, Tony had already built his empire and a mansion for his wife and new baby. Since then, his business only continued to grow. Today, he not only filled his mansion with the best furniture and art and cars, but he also bought more houses to fill with furniture, art, and cars. I got a promotion today, Sergio said. The one I told you I applied for. I got it. Head of the company? Tony asked, laughing again. Tony, be nice, Sergio's mother said. Congratulations, Sergio. We're so proud of you. We need to have a celebration. Your favorite pasta and cake? We have to have a cake. What was the job you applied for again? Project manager. That sounds nice, his mother said. Tony snorted. Don't rest on your laurels, Sergio. Always upward. Did you catch the game last night? Sergio noticed he was gritting his teeth, and he forced himself to relax. I saw the score. I missed the game because we went out to dinner to celebrate my promotion. Did you meet anyone? Sergio's mother asked. No, Mama. It was just the people in my department. Violet is the only woman who's interested in me. They got no taste, Tony said. At least Violet knows a good thing when she sees it. Sergio's mother snorted. She wasn't Violet's biggest fan. Sergio made his excuses to get off the phone as fast as he could. He was asking himself why he called his parents to begin with. Well, he knew why he called them. He called them to get validation. He was trying to feel like he'd finally gotten enough to have arrived. Why in the world did he think he'd get the validation from his father? And that validation from his father. All the rich food he ate that night before must have slowed down his brain function. Sergio's new office was outstanding. His job was not. The office wasn't huge. It wasn't a corner office or anything. Honestly, it was just a small plain room tucked between the break room and a conference room. But it was his. Plus his windows had shades, which for some reason were missing from the windows out on the design floor. Sorry, I had to burp. Which for some reason were missing from the windows out on the design floor. Sergio happily pulled those shades down when the sun came around to spear his eyes at 2 in the afternoon. The shade-pulling moment was, however, the only happy moment of the day. The rest of the day was just a mind-numbing blur as he tried to get up to speed with what Sanders had been doing. Or rather, had not been doing. After just 2 hours of assessing the situation, he understood why Sanders had left earlier than expected. This was not a job for one person. It was a job for at least 10 people, plus assistants. Clive was right. Sergio was an idiot. He hadn't been told what his pay rise would be before he applied for the promotion, but he figured it would be a decent increase. He was wrong. He was only going to get another $1,000 a month to do 10 times more work. Idiot, he muttered to himself as he tried to organize the few tasks he thought he might be able to get done today if he stayed until nearly midnight. Sergio's door opened and Clive's head popped in, along with the aromas wafting over the break room. Sergio could smell coffee, popcorn, and someone's microwave burritos. How's the new job? Clive asked. Sergio dropped his head to the pile of paperwork in front of him and pounded it a couple times. That good, huh? Clive came the rest of the way into the room and sat in one of the narrow leather and stainless steel chairs in front of Sergio. He looked around at Sergio's plain oak desk, the other chair, the shelves piled with project files, and the drafting table tucked in the corner. So you do have a drafting table, Clive noted. Think you'll get to use it? Sergio didn't answer the question. Instead, he asked, Do you ever think we reach our ideals? Clive turned sideways and put his feet up on the other chair in front of the desk. That's a deep question. Sorry, I know you hate to use your dozen or so brain cells to think about deep questions. Yeah, you're stressing me out here. Never mind. No, it's a good question. Honest answer? I don't think ideals are actually real. I think they only exist in our heads. I mean, have you ever drawn something that was as good as you imagined it in your head? If you have, I'll buy you dinner every night for a week, because I sure haven't. As tempting as it is to lie to get those dinners, Sergio said, grinning. No, I haven't. There you go. We're all a bunch of donkeys. What? You know, the carrot and the stick. We're just a bunch of donkeys plodding along to reach a carrot that will forever dangle out in front of us, no matter how long and how far we plod. That's depressing. Clive shrugged and shook his head, doing an unintentional impression of Bubbles the Labradoodle. Then my work is done, he grinned. Seriously, I don't think it's depressing at all. It's kind of freeing when you think about it. If we can't get what we want, why bother trying? Just do your best and have a good time. He paused and saluted. Mr. Idiot, sir. He bowed multiple times as he backed out of Sergio's office. Sergio laughed, then sombered and tried to concentrate on work. 2.5 weeks into the new position, Sergio had doubled his caffeine consumption, and he still was constantly 10 paces behind. He'd already made 2 dumb mistakes that cost the firm several $1,000s, and he'd already been berated twice by a client. Dale assured him that this was a normal part of the learning curve for the project manager job. But Sergio was still mortified. He was also bored and disappointed. He thought that becoming the project manager would give him more leeway to implement cutting-edge design ideas, more freedom to break past the boundaries of the usual renovations his department did. For some time, he was frustrated by the safe, limited changes their clients made to their homes. He wanted to be given carte blanche to bust into a place, demo the heck out of it, and turn it into something else entirely. He thought a project manager would hold enough sway that he could make that vision a reality. He was wrong. The project he had to oversee were the same old things, and now in addition to disliking the types of jobs he was working on, he had responsibility for more aspects of those jobs. This new position really was just more work and no more satisfaction. Not only was the work in full suck mode, but his home life sucked, and such as it was, had gone down the toilet as well. Mrs. Bailey had taken staying up late so she could greet him with her latest suggestions for getting more sleep. Then there was the tenant who lived above him. The woman who had the apartment on the next floor up took dancing lessons. He had been listening to her stomping above his head for weeks. He didn't know her name, but he had given her the title of Thunderfeet. Now, for some reason, Thunderfeet was practicing until 2 a.m. He tried to talk to her about it one night, but after scolding him for ringing her doorbell too late, she called him names that made him blush. Also, because he never had time to go to the grocery store, he was eating more takeout, and because he was tired when he got home, he rarely exercised and instead just dropped into bed. These 2 changes had resulted in a disturbing potbelly that was growing with each passing day. Sergio's dissatisfaction was growing with each passing day, too. So were the numbers of hours he was working. It was near midnight most nights when he left the firm, and he always came home with a stack of work to look over before he went to bed. As if all this wasn't bad enough, Violet hated Sergio's new hours even more than he did, and it was turning her into a nag. How come you have to work all the time, Sergio? She asked him on Saturday night, at the end of his first week as project manager. They were at a party she insisted they attend, even though they couldn't get there until after 10:30 p.m., because he worked until then. He knew she was going to want to stay until at least 2 hours or later, and then he was going to have to get up and get into work early Sunday morning. If he didn't, there was no way he could handle Monday. Because it's part of the new job? Sergio said with a thick layer of sarcasm. The new job I just got promoted into? It's a high workload job. What do you suggest I do? Get a saw and cut the workload in half? He never should have said that. Violet laughed hysterically, and everyone at the party turned to stare at them. And so it went. Work. Try and please his girlfriend. Get home late. Deal with Mrs. Bailey. Eat junk. Listen to Thunderfeet. Finally go to sleep. Rinse and repeat. His days were basically drudgery. The only few minutes in them that he really liked were those moments when he walked out of the building and admired his dedicated project manager's parking spot. Now there was a perk worth working your tail off for. Not. Strolled to it and got in his car. This was his fleeting moment of freedom. Every night, he got just a few seconds of joy in this feeling of escape. But even that was beyond his reach on this rainy Tuesday night. Because the forecast had been for the usual sunshine, Sergio wasn't prepared for rain. Even though his new parking spot was only 20 feet from the firm's door, he and his stack of papers were soaked when he got into his SUV. And he was cold, and he was hungry. Sergio put his papers on the passenger seat. He turned on the heat full blast, which caused the vehicle to steam up, and his wool suit started smelling like a wet farm animal. Or was that his own smell? He didn't know. Personal hygiene was another thing this job was taking from him. Pulling out of the parking lot, Sergio couldn't help but notice that he had the road mostly to himself. It had been like that every night this week, which was why it was not just annoying, but screamingly inconvenient when his 2-year-old SUV decided to die in the totally closed and deserted retail district of downtown. Sergio was barely able to coast to the curb before the SUV lost all momentum and drifted to a full, silent stop. Sergio looked at the still bright dashboard lights, not the battery. He looked at the gas tank. It was half full, not out of gas. "Are you kidding me?" Sergio asked his vehicle. It had no response. He tried to restart the SUV. Nothing. There was no point in him looking under the hood. He knew nothing about vehicle engines. So Sergio sat in the dead SUV and listened to rain thrumming on the roof. He tried to see through the gray murk of the falling water. Everything outside the SUV was vague and obscure, but from what he could tell, no one was around. He peered into the gloom, looking for an open sign on one of the storefronts. He didn't see any. The block had no bars or restaurants, so nothing was open. He thought about where he was, and he remembered there was a gas station 2 blocks over. Hopefully he could get a tow truck there. But that meant walking in the rain for 10 minutes. Oh joy! Sergio leaned his head on the steering wheel. What a perfectly awful end to a perfectly awful week. Sergio raised his head and looked at the still wet stack of papers sitting on the passenger seat. He had the urge to pick them up and throw them out in the rain. And he could see himself doing it in his mind's eye. And he could see himself dancing around on top of them. Blowing out air, Sergio motioned at his dead car and said, "Camel's back, meet your last straw." The rain started coming down harder. Sergio leaned back in his seat and closed his eyes. How had he gone here? After all his hard work, all his thriving, all his determination, after all that comes this, a broken down SUV in the middle of the night in the pouring rain. Fine. Sergio opened the door and stepped out into the weather. He was soaked immediately. He slammed the SUV's driver's door, stomped forward 2 feet, and kicked the front tire as hard as he could. "Ouch!" Sergio screamed. He hopped over on 1 foot and marveled at how much pain a toe could generate. Water slid down inside his collar, and his hopping foot splashed water up his pant leg. Resisting the urge to kick his vehicle again, Sergio stomped away from it. Then he pulled his ruined suit jacket up over his head as a makeshift hood, and he sloshed over to the sidewalk. There, he put his head down and trudged away. The streetlights provided enough illumination for him to see the sidewalk cracks and the curb. This was all he needed for navigation. He had gone just a block when the rain started to let up. Not really caring at that point because he was already wet through and through, Sergio kept walking. But then 2 things happened at once. The rain stopped entirely, and Sergio nearly tripped over an overstuffed green garbage bag lying in the middle of the sidewalk. Sergio lowered his suit coat, and he looked around. The nearest streetlight poured pale yellow light down on a dumpster that had tipped partway over. Its contents were spilled all over the sidewalk. Partially eaten food, sold-in papers, and collapsed latte cups were strewn all around. Sergio began taking careful steps around the trash. He had gone a couple of feet when the streetlight's glow hit something brightly colored. Sergio assumed it was a plastic bowl or cup, but even so, he glanced at it Gosh, I'm messing up a lot. Sorry for the people listening. He glanced at it as he passed. He stopped. It wasn't a plastic bowl or cup. What was it? Curious about the unique shape standing out among the ordinary refuse, Sergio took a step closer to it. It was a bright red propeller on top of a cap. Leaning over, Sergio discovered that the propeller cap was attached to the round head of a small, maybe 10-inch high plastic figurine. The figurine was that of a small boy with reddish-brown hair, big blue eyes, an orange triangular nose, rosy cheeks, and a wide mouth full of pronounced white teeth. The figure's round head was matched in shapes and size with the trunk of its body, which resembled a colorful bowling ball with arms and legs. The figurine was wearing a short-sleeved, two-button shirt that had vertical red and blue stripes, matching the pattern on the cap. The shirt was tucked into solid blue pants, and the pants cuffs ended at the top of a pair of plain brown shoes. The shoes were more rounded than foot-shaped, but they matched the boy's fingerless, stumpy hands. Both hands were occupied. The figurine's right hand held a large red and yellow striped balloon, and the figurine's right hand held a small sign that read, "I'm a lucky boy." "You are you?" Sergio playfully asked the figurine. "Do you have any tips? I could use some luck." "I'm a lucky boy," the figurine said in a high-pitched child's voice. Sergio widened his eyes and stared. This wasn't just a figurine. It was an electronic toy. Surprised the toy was still working despite sitting in the rain. He was intrigued enough to pick it up. Wet, cold, hard, and slippery, the toy was light in weight, and though it looked old-fashioned, it was in great condition. No paint was scarred or faded. Sergio turned the toy this way and that, looking for a control switch. He couldn't see one. He checked for a speaker and saw none. He scanned for a battery compartment, but found nada. Interesting. So was "I'm a lucky boy" all the toy said? Just for fun, Sergio decided to talk to the toy. "You say you're a lucky boy, like your sign says. Good for you." "Good for you," the toy said. "Oh, okay." The toy probably had some stock phrases to play, and it was programmed to repeat back what it heard. That it is recorded. Its inner workings were surprisingly well hidden. It didn't seem like a cheap toy. Sergio decided to test his theory about the recording. He said, "Testing, testing." The little toy didn't repeat the words. Instead it said, "It's lucky to be lucky." Then it emitted a funny little ha 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 giggle. Sergio smiled. The giggle was infectious. Sergio looked around. He was still alone. He looked back at the toy and shrugged. "Do you have a name?" Sergio asked the toy. "My name is Lucky Boy," the toy said. Sergio snorted. "I never would have guessed." Sergio wondered if Lucky Boy was worth anything. Probably not. But either way, he found he couldn't leave it lying there. It was unique, and it looked antique. He loved unique antiques. He'd make them part of his home decor. Tucking the toy under his arm, Sergio walked on, and within 5 minutes, he was in the gas station convenience store making arrangements to have his car towed. While he signed paperwork, he set Lucky Boy on the counter. The teenage clerk behind the counter called the tow truck driver and then returned to the counter to watch Sergio sign papers. The teen was acne-spotted and limp-haired, but he was dressed in a clean blue uniform shirt with khaki pants, and he was friendly enough. "Sorry your car broke down, dude," he said. "Hey, do you want to buy a lottery ticket for tomorrow's drawing? It could help you for car repairs." "No thanks," Sergio said. He was trying to breathe deeply because the gas station convenience store smelled like pork rinds and dirty socks, but he involuntarily sucked in air when Lucky Boy said in his soprano-toned child voice, "It's your lucky day!" "Hey, dude," the teen said. "Cool doll." "It's not a doll." "Okay, whatever. It's still cool." Sergio looked at Lucky Boy and shrugged. "Okay, I'll take a ticket after all. Who knows?" "Exactly," the clerk beamed. He rang up a ticket. It was nearly 3 a.m. when the tow truck driver dropped Sergio off at his apartment building. Sergio didn't bother to explain in Lucky Boy to the heavyset driver, who eyed the toy and Sergio with suspicion. Tiptoeing through the hallway outside his apartment, he managed to open and close his door without being pestered. It seemed pestered. It seemed there was an hour past which Miss Bailey would not stay up. He looked at the toy he still carried. Maybe it is my lucky day after all. Lucky Boy emitted his mischievous giggle. Smiling, Sergio took Lucky Boy into his bedroom and set him on top of his cherry bureau next to the ceramic tray. Then he emptied his soggy pockets, stripped off his ruined clothes, took a hot shower, and fell into bed. 2.5 hours later, his alarm nearly catapulted him across the room. Groaning, Sergio sleepwalked through getting dressed. Then he called a cab. Any wise words? Sergio asked Lucky Boy before he left the apartment. Lucky Boy giggled and said again, "Today's your lucky day!" Sergio couldn't say he agreed with the assessment, but technically the day was still ongoing. So, no, not so. It's who knew what could happen. Running on just 2.5 hours of sleep, he could use a little luck. The day went by in a sleep-deprived blur. He was a walking zombie. And when Dale corrected him on math for the 10th time, the last being when Sergio added 6 and 7 and came up with 15, he finally admitted, "Dale, I'm sorry. I'm asleep on my feet. My ACV broke down in the rain last night. I got 2.5 hours of sleep." "Go home," Dale said. Sergio flinched. Was he being fired? Dale laughed. "You're not being punished. We're not total ogres. And we're not total ogres here. When you need sleep, you need sleep. Go home and sleep. When you come back, maybe you can tell me again what 6 plus 7 is." When Sergio let Violet know he was leaving, she offered to lend him her car. "I can get someone to take me to your place later to get it. And then we can go out to that gallery opening I wanted us to go to. You'll be rested enough by the end of the day, right?" Sergio started to nod. Then he stopped himself. He didn't want to go to a gallery opening. If this was his lucky day, didn't he deserve to tell the truth for a change? He shook his head and refused to accept the car keys. Violet was thrusting in his direction. "I'm gonna call a cab," he said. "Then I'm going to go to bed and sleep straight through until morning. I don't want to go out later." Violet gave him the little pout he used to think was kind of cute. He turned away from her and headed back to his office to call a cab. On his way home, in the cab, Sergio heard a news report about the big lottery. Something about one of the winners buying a winning ticket at a gas station downtown. He wondered if it was the gas station he went to the previous night. He should check his ticket. By the time Sergio returned home, though, he was in a semi-conscious state. He didn't have enough energy to check his lottery ticket. Instead, he fell into bed and slept for 4 hours. He woke a little after 8 p.m., and feeling not even a little guilty about his latest lie to Violet, he ordered a pepperoni pizza, taking it into his bed because he was still too tired to think. Sergio turned on the TV. The local news was ending. The perky female controller said, "And to end on a light note, 5 people drew the winning numbers for the latest big jackpot. One of these tickets was bought right here in our town. Congratulations to the winner, whoever you are." "That's right, the ticket." Sergio jumped off the bed. He dashed to a ceramic tray and dug for the ticket. Grabbing it, he picked up his phone, bringing up the winning numbers on the screen. He compared them to the numbers on the ticket. And he blinked and compared them again. They matched. Every number matched. Sergio jumped up and shouted, "Yes!" Above him, thunder feet pounded on the floor. "Same to you," he shouted. Sergio ran to the bureau and picked up Lucky Boy. He held the toy out like a dance partner and spun around the room. "You're brilliant! Absolutely brilliant!" Lucky Boy sounded off his funny little giggle. Sergio mimicked the giggle and threw himself on his bed. He kicked his feet in the air and whooped. Thunder feet pounded again. "To hell with you!" he shouted. He wasn't going to put up with crap anymore. He had the means to fix all the problems he had in his life now. Oh yeah, things were going to change. The next day, Sergio called in sick to work. When Violet telephoned later to check on him, he let the answering machine pick it up. Then he visited the lottery headquarters to claim his winnings. Because he was one of the 5 people who had the winning numbers, after taxes, he ended up with just a little over 600,000. That was okay. It was plenty. Back at home, Sergio relaxed in his living room and pondered what to do next. He had so many choices. The car repair place had called him to tell him he had an oil leak that bled the vehicle dry of oil. The resulting engine damage would cost thousands to repair. Should he spend it, or just sell the thing as it was for parts and get something new? Grinning, Sergio stood and went to get Lucky Boy, carrying the toy back into the living room, and feeling only a little silly, he asked Lucky Boy, "Should I repair my car, or get a new one?" "You deserve good things," Lucky Boy sang out. "You're right, I do." Sergio sat back and put Lucky Boy in his lap. "What kind of car do I deserve?" "You deserve to have your dreams come true." "Really?" Sergio thought about his dream car, the car he always wanted, a car that his father had once called an impractical waste of money. This from a man who had 17 cars. Wasn't having more than 2 or 3 cars an impractical waste of money? "You don't buy cars for flash, son," Tony always said. "You buy them for value. You buy flash, and you're just asking to be ripped off. You'll pay more than the car is worth, and you'll be a magnet for car thieves." "What if I like Flash?" Sergio asked out loud now. "You deserve Flash," Lucky Boy piped up. "What should I buy?" Sergio asked. "Buy a flashy sports car. The more expensive, the better." Sergio fired off a finger gun at the little toy. "I like how you think." He ignored the part of him that was a smidget creeped out by the fact that he was having a conversation with a toy. Lucky Boy had given him better advice than he ever gotten from anyone else. Who was he to care about where that advice came from? So he bought a bright red, expensive, flashy sports car, high-end, highly visible, and as impressive as all get out. Sergio's new car made him feel way more impressive than his silly aviator-style watch. And speaking of his watch, "What kind of watch should I buy?" he asked Lucky Boy after he got home with his new car. "You deserve bling!" Sergio got dressed and headed back out in his flashy car. He went to the best jewelry store in town, and he spent $37,000 on a new gold watch. It was impressive. After he got the watch, he stopped and called Violet. She had just gone home from work. "How would you like to have dinner at the Horizon?" he asked, grinning when she sucked in her breath. The Horizon was the best restaurant in town. Violet squealed. "What's the occasion?" "I'll tell you when I pick you up. Meet me out front of your building." "I thought your SUV was still in the shop," she said. "It is. I bought myself a new ride. It's red. You can't miss it." "Okay," Violet said, drawing out the word as if she thought he'd lost his marbles. He laughed and hung up, driving to Violet's apartment building and revving the engine as he neared her building. He stomped on the accelerator to zoom forward, then slammed on the brakes, coming to a screeching stop next to the curb just a foot from her. She stared in open-mouthed shock at his new wheels. "What do you think?" he asked as the powerful engine rumbled and she gaped at the car. "How?" Violet asked. "Project managers don't make that much more than senior architects." "Get in. I'll tell you about it." Violet beamed at him as she opened the door. Over a steak and lobster dinner, complete with huge slices of the most decadent chocolate cake he had ever eaten, Sergio told Violet about his lottery win. He didn't, however, tell her about Lucky Boy. That somehow seemed like a secret he needed to keep to himself. And he should have kept the lottery win to himself, too. Violet immediately started telling him how he should spend the money. "You should buy a boat," she told him as she plowed through her slice of cake. "We could go out on the lake every weekend. Oh, and you should buy a timeshare. Then we could go to different places every weekend. Or maybe we just take a trip around the world. Oh wait, a cruise. We should take a cruise. Or we could go..." Sergio wasn't really listening to her. He was savoring the amazing chocolate cake, but he said, at appropriate intervals, until he noticed she wasn't talking anymore. He also noticed when she whacked his knuckles with her fork. "Ow! What?" "I said, what is that?" She gestured at his new watch. "Oh yeah," Sergio suddenly remembered. "I've got to show you this to you. I got it this afternoon. It cost $37,000, but I deserve it." Sergio took another bite of cake. Violet touched the watch reverently and beamed. She looked at him, her eyes bright. So, what did you get me? I was wondering all evening. I figured you have to have gotten me something since you won all that money. I figure you're saving it for the end of the dinner. But now I can't wait any longer. What did you get me? Sergio set down his fork. He looked down. What? Violet asked. You did get me something, right? Sergio winced. You got yourself a new sports car and a $37,000 watch, and you didn't get me anything? Violet's voice rose, at least an octave, at the end of the question. Think, he told himself. Surely he could come up with some good reason he didn't buy her anything. Violet stood and threw down her napkin. Take me home right now! Sergio didn't argue. He didn't have the energy, and he realized he didn't care that she was angry. He just took her home. There, Violet got out of the car and started to walk away. Then she turned back and said, You better have something for me tomorrow! She marched off her hips, swaying emphatically in her wake. Sergio didn't give Violet a thought after he left her apartment building. He was feeling too good to be bothered by her tantrum. When he got home, Sergio showed his watch to Lucky Boy. What do you think? He asked. Lucky Boy giggled. You look impressive! The next day, Sergio put on his new watch and went to work in his new car. Nice wheels, Clive said when he walked into Sergio's office a little after 9. The positions must pay more than I thought it did. Close the door, Sergio said. He learned his lesson from Violet. Telling people about his lottery win could be tricky. Clive raised his eyebrows and closed the door. He flopped into one of Sergio's visitor chairs. What's the big secret? Did you rob a bank? No, Sergio grinned. He lowered his voice. I won the lottery. Clive laughed. Good one. Really? I bought a ticket because... Sergio stopped himself. He'd been about to tell Clive about Lucky Boy. He again got the strong feeling he should keep that bit to himself. He covered his near mistake by saying, Because I had a whim, and I won. Clive shook his head. Good for you. He spotted Sergio's watch. Nice bling. Sergio flushed. I deserve some bling. Sure you do. So, what's next? Oh, I know. How about you buy your good friend Clive a swimming pool? Unlike Violet, Clive was kidding. Or at least Sergio hoped he was. He decided to go with a kidding response. Ha! Sergio rolled his eyes. Win your own lottery. Then you can buy your own swimming pool. Party pooper. When I buy my swimming pool, you can come over and use it. Are you buying one? Sergio shrugged. Actually, I'm not sure what I'm going to do next. I need to ask. Oops. He almost let it slip again. Clive looked at him. Who are you going to ask? Your mommy? Sergio flipped a pen at Clive. Funny. No, not my mommy. I mean, just ask, in general. Like, ask my intuition, ask the universe. Like that. When did you get spiritual? Having money is an exalting experience. Clive laughed. Well, even so, you'd better get to work. Dale was on a rampage yesterday about having to pick up your load because you were out sick. And the Jenkins project is kind of a mess. Sergio frowned. I'm not criticizing, Clive said. I couldn't do what you've been doing half as well as you have. But I'm just warning you that the powers that be aren't going to care about your car or your bling. Sergio sighed. You're right. Obviously, I made a mess of things a couple days ago. I need to fix it. Clive stood, leaned over Sergio's desk, and raised his hand. High five. Sergio slapped Clive's hand. Honestly, I'm happy for you, Clive said. Enjoy. Just don't cut off your nose to spite your face. What does that mean? And what does that even mean? Sergio asked. I'm not really sure. It's just what my mother said when I ever did something dumb in reaction to something. Actually, I don't think it's applicable here. But whatever. Just be careful with your decisions. Yes, Dad. Clive laughed and left Sergio's office. Sergio stared at his watch for several minutes, then got to work. And he was still working long after everyone else left, even Violet. She wasn't speaking to him. It was after midnight when he left the building and headed for his... Where was his car? His nice, new, bright, and shiny sports car wasn't in his parking spot. What the heck? Sergio turned a full circle in his empty parking spot. Then he sighed, went back into his office, and called the police. The police officer who took his stolen car report was nice enough to give Sergio a ride home. That was kind of fun. Sergio enjoyed listening to the chatter on the police radio, and he liked the way the leather creaked when he moved in his seat. He wasn't as keen on the weird smell coming from the back seat, a combination of bleach and something sour smelling. He didn't ask about it. "Sorry your car got stolen the first day you owned it," the young officer said when he pulled up outside Sergio's building. His name tag read Neil, which Sergio assumed was a last name. "That bites the big one." Sergio unbuckled his seatbelt and turned toward Officer Neil. He noticed the officer's buzz cut was recent. He could see white skin between his brown hair and the tan on his neck. "And you don't think I'll get it back?" "It's probably out of state by now," Neil said. "Or it's in parts." His voice broke often, like a teenager going through puberty. Sergio shook his head. Well, at least it was insured. He reached for the passenger door handle. "Yeah, but they get you there too. You'll get a blue book for it, but that won't be as much as you paid for it. You're out taxes and license and all that." Sergio smiled at Neil as he pushed the door open. "Well, you're a ray of sunshine," Neil laughed. "Sorry, this job tends to create pessimists." Sergio marveled that Officer Neil had been on the job long enough to become a pessimist. He wondered what Officer Neil's goals were. Did he have a big dream? "Thanks for the ride," Sergio said as he got out of the squad car. He waved as Neil drove away, and he went in the front entrance of his building, whistling. He wasn't going to let this get him down. It was just a little setback. His luck had changed. Or maybe not. As he got in the elevator and pushed the button for the 4th floor, his upstairs neighbor dashed up behind him and shoved her way past him. He flicked a look of annoyance at her. She mistook it for something else. "What are you looking at?" Thunderfeet snapped as she pounded on the 5th floor button. Wearing tight exercise pants and a sports bra, she must have thought he was admiring her. He wasn't. Not that she was bad looking. She was actually cute, slender, and just curvy enough, with blonde hair and a nice face. But she was too tall for him. She was at least 5'10" to his 5'7". Not to mention her personality ruined everything about her looks. "Nothing," Sergio said as the elevator made a clunking sound and started to rise. "Nothing at all." Thunderfeet didn't smell good. She smelled like sweat and cigarette smoke. He concentrated on breathing through his mouth. She sniffed and looked at him sideways. "You'd better not wake me up again tonight." Sergio glanced at her incredulously. "Me? Wake you up?" She glared at him. He ignored her as the elevator doors opened and he got out on his floor. One of the cheap beige carpet squares that covered the hallways in the building was sticking up just outside the elevator, and he tripped over it. He managed to catch himself, but he staggered a few feet before he did. He heard her mutter, "Loser," as the elevator doors closed behind him. His shoulders tightened as he started down the hall, and by the time he was at his door, his good mood was slipping away. And just as he took out his keys, Mrs. Bailey threw her door open behind him and sang out, "I made oatmeal raisin cookies!" Sergio whirled around and yelled, "I hate raisins!" Mrs. Bailey, a plastic wrap covered plate of cookies extended out in front of her, drew back. Her face bunched up in the middle like someone pulled on a drawstring attached to her skin. Her lower lip quivered. "Well, why haven't you never said so?" "I was being polite," Sergio shouted. "But I don't feel like being polite right now. In fact, I don't feel like being in here right now. I just want to be left alone." Mrs. Bailey's eyes moistened. She nodded her head and quietly retreated from her apartment. Sergio felt like a jerk, but he also felt exhilarated. Saying what he wanted was very freeing. Inside his apartment, Sergio went through his usual post-work routine.